Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And we've been talking a lot about Jive, G, and mold. And last week we decoded the Super Deep Borehole movie. Many of you guys watched that particular decode. And in that movie, the scientists find killer mold in the bottom of this borehole in northern Russia. Well, I kept digging around in some of these, episodes of different TV shows, and Fringe was a particular episode that I wanted to look at, or a particular series, and I found this episode of Fringe called Alone in the World. And this episode was all about mold, too. Now, this released in 2011, and what makes this episode special is the fact that the plot of this episode very closely resembles what we saw in two recent decodes. One, the Super Deep Borehole, and the other was the TV series Archive 81. And as we go through these clips, you will see the similarities between all the other things we uncovered in those decodes. So what's this episode about? Well, it's about this boy who develops a symbiotic relationship with a mold that grows in this underground cavern. Now, let's get into this here. Let's make sure you guys are with me, and we'll keep going with this. So, Dr. Bishop, you're going to see him here in a second when I start to play this. He begins to see his son Peter in these black mirror reflections. Now, we saw this play out in Archive 81. It was all about this black mirror, this stone that supposedly came from a comet, and this was what brought this mold or this goo into our, onto our plane here. Let's keep watching.
Walter, it is important that you be completely honest with me so that I can make an assessment of your state of mind. So you haven't had any more of these hallucinations since?
So he sees his son Peter in the back of this man's, what do they call these? His writing board or whatever. And he sees him throughout this episode. He sees Peter, this is his son, in the other dimension. Now, what is this about? Well, the black stone originated from a comet. And like I said before this, it's the source of the black mold. Now, historically, we've seen associations drawn between comets and their contents and spamdemics that have happened around the world. The Black Plague and things like this. They said it was associated with comets. So they're bringing that theme forward into these TV series, but I believe there's an element of truth to it because the mold was supernaturally demonic and basically could possess anyone who came into contact with it in series like Archive 81. Remember, the woman starts painting with this black mold, and then she becomes taken over and possessed. She becomes a spirit receiver for the enemy. Now, in this Fringe episode, of course, as you just saw, we get a hint of the same theme, this comet-born Blackstone, when he sees his son in the reflection. Let's keep watching here. Now, what does all this mean? Well, I believe that this Blackstone is the man in the mirror. Let's back this up, actually. I want to show you guys this. The man in the mirror. Now, many of you will remember that Thump was seen as the man in the mirror. So, and he was, of course, the bringer of the stickers, right? And the bringer of division and chaos. Let's see if, oh, there it is there. And there were many, many images of him in this mirror, right? He was on the cover. There was all these cartoons made about him. Okay. Why? Why? Because he liked to see himself in the mirror. He had pictures of himself all over the house. So in effect, that's a man in the mirror. Putting a picture of yourself in your own house is the ultimate form of ego. It means you have so much ego inside of you that you want to see yourself everywhere you go, which was his brand as well. It was a T everywhere. Everywhere his properties, he would put this T on everything. So there's a connection here. The man in the mirror, the bringer of the stickers, and of course the chaos and destruction and division that ensued. He acted as the comet, basically, that brings disease and destruction. Now, Apollo also brought disease and the cure. That's what he was known for in antiquity. So I don't think we're far off the mark here in breaking this down in this fashion. This is all spiritual. It's happening on a spiritual level, and it's as well as symbolic. The facts is that this spamdemic happened under his presidency, and he offered the cure, and he calls himself Apollo. Those are the facts. Apollo, bringer of disease, and the bringer of the cure. So he actually fit on a spiritual level with what is known about these different characters. Now, history has shown us that had we ignored the spamdemic, or at least limited the strategy to affect only those who are most vulnerable, right, and provide options for them, well, I think that we can all agree that history has proven that that would have been the proper course, to make accommodations for those most vulnerable instead of placing the entire economy under, basically hijacked. And so we could have saved the economy with minimal impact to the health of the country, because it's impossible to try to unite a country behind an effort by forcing half of its people to do something against their will. That's never worked in history before. It always leads to civil conflict. Let's keep watching this here.
What the hell is this?
So this boy here, he's getting bullied, of course, by these two other boys. So he leads them down into this service tunnel. And little does he know that he's developed this symbiotic relationship with the mold. The mold then attacks the boys because the boy here is under threat. So let's keep watching.
Corpse is pulling high levels of oxygen out of the air. Corpse is pulling high levels of oxygen out of the air.
So Bishop, this guy here, realizes it's the mold that killed the boys, when he realizes that the mold is actually sucking oxygen out of the air. And now I'm starting to wonder if there is a mold component to VidCo 19, representing lack of oxygen, because that's what mold does. It pulls oxygen out of the air and everything around it. Let's keep watching.
Corpse is pulling high levels of oxygen out of the air. Dear God. The incubation case. Don't remember there being this much mold on the rib cage before. Quickly! Grab the other end. We have to contain it.
So, just like in the Super Deep movie that we just decoded last week, the mold explodes and releases all these spores. Let's keep watching.
Spores? I had assumed that the mold was just a symptom of the rapid decomposition. I'm starting to believe that it was an aggressive form of fungi that killed the boys.
What are you doing? We gotta get them out. We can't open that door. We need to get a team in here and lock down the area. We can't just leave them to die.
Remember, you guys will remember that scene as well in Super Deep, where there's a room and they have to lock different parts of it off to try to contain it, but there really is no way to contain it. And then we get a clue that takes us right back to iPetGoat 2, which had not released yet when this episode came out. iPetGoat 2 released in 2012, and this episode released a year earlier. But yet here we see the apple with the two fetuses. What does this represent? Well, these are the two seeds. the two seeds. And look here at iPad Goat 2. The two seeds. The two seeds intertwined with one another. Now, what is this all about? It's the twisting seed lines, the merging of the two seeds into one magnetic field, into the tree of evil, leaving out the good, leaving the good behind. Remember, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was most likely, it is our prison, but what it is most likely are two magnetic fields of opposites, positive and negative. And literally, the magnetic field looks like a tree with a trunk and branches and roots. And this is our prison. This is where we're at. We're locked here. Everything in this reality is about duality and division. The devil rules this reality, and he rules through duality and division, which is how God knew that if Eve entered this tree through the portal, that she would surely die. How do you combat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? With unity. You disable the positive, negative magnetic fields, and you find unity in the middle with Christ, which is, do not believe the ruler of this world's lies and how he tries to pit one side against the other. Because I think everybody could agree that if we self-governed, 99% of the conflicts and differences and all the things that divide us would simply disappear. The conflict and division is coming from the top down. And this is why you see the checkerboard floor beneath the seeds, beneath the two magnetic fields. An apple is the shape of a magnetic field. So what you're looking at here is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But the enemy wants to elevate himself above the Most High and unite the two seeds under a false pretense, under evil, which is to do what thou wilt, which ultimately always affects other people. You can't just do what you want in this reality, because your choices and decisions will ultimately affect other people. And that is not love. That is not the law of love. So let's keep watching here.
I'm already dead. I'm already dead.
So, Dunham, that's Agent Dunham, she realizes we're already dead. Now, what does that really mean? Well, it suggests that many of us who made certain choices about what they will and won't put into their bodies basically are dead men walking.
How do you recommend killing these things?
A strong dose of UV light or intense heat.
So Dr. Bishop realizes that UV light or intense heat are basically the only two things that can kill mold. Now, we did a decode on a very important building in New York called the Wyndham New Yorker. And inside the hotel, they were using a brand new technology in its time. This was in the 1930s. And it was the use of UV lamps to sanitize all of the bathrooms. Now, I've got clips of this machine that they had. It was basically a giant UV lamp. And I began to think about this because we've been trying to solve the mystery of the New Yorker, haven't we? The place where Tesla died on the 33rd floor. Because the New Yorker was a giant electromagnetic power plant. And in fact, interestingly, it was a direct current power plant. Even though Tesla invented AC current, he lived and died in this place that had DC current. Now, this building was a wonder of the world during its time, during its heyday. It was self-contained. It was able to power itself, independent of the grid. So you can imagine the strength of the magnetic field that it must have produced. It even boasted a radio in every room, which likely expanded that electromagnetic field from the engine room that was down in the basement to every other room in the hotel. Now, here's what we know about mold. It is excited and releases mycotoxins when it is exposed to electromagnetic frequencies. And now I'm starting to wonder if the reason why they had to bring this new technology of UV light, I'm wondering if it was to control mold that was growing out of control in the hotel based on the high electromagnetic fields and frequencies going on in that building. Mold that was excited by those frequencies. And now I'm starting to wonder if that particular situation was the discovery of an unintended discovery that would later become the concept behind the modern mold bioweapon.
Should effectively eradicate them.
Now here's the machine here. We've covered this before in previous decodes. It's a sanitizer is what it's billed as. GE Electric made it. It killed everything. And of course we know, based on Dr. Bishop's comments, that it also killed mold. They then wrapped these bathrooms in cellophane. Was that to prevent new spores from landing?
Understood. Agent Mace's broils. We're going to need high-intensity UV lamps in here, as many as you can find.
So I crossed over to the other side with the intention of bringing him back to Q.
So Dr. Bishop begins connecting with this boy to try to figure out, the nature of this connection that he has to this mold. So, of course, they put on the tinfoil hats. Now, we've all seen tinfoil hats before, but I think in this context, it means something much different. I believe that what they're depicting here are metal crowns, symbolizing the mixing of metal with humans, which could essentially turn each human into a battery that they could then interface with Jive G and the network to draw power off of us. Now, what would that do? Well, there would be all kinds of EMF in the air, which would increase mold growth. And that would be the dark symbol, the visual representation of the hive mind. We would see it all around us. Mold is the visual representation of the energy transfer from humans to the Jive G grid, just like in Archive 81, where the mold became the proof that the portal was opened and that soul energy was being transferred. So in other words, the mold is a perfect metaphor for the hive mind.
Cure him, and I discovered an alternate universe where another version of my son was dying from the same malady. But the frozen lake where I created a portal between universes was unsound.
Now he explains here to the boy how dimension shifts, or aka time travel, works. So now we have the time travel component to this. Portals between universes. Now, in Bishop's case, his portal opened in a cold and sub-zero place, which you're going to hear him describe here as a frozen lake. Let's back this up a little bit.
But the frozen lake where I created a portal between universes was unsound. And when we crossed back, the ice broke.
So, interesting, right? Because this is the kind of place, this frozen landscape, where you would store an organism, like a Pokemon sticker. Now we're starting to get some clues here. Now, the boy's name, the boy here was depicted, his name in real life is Evan Bird, and his stage name in the episode is Snedden. What does Snedden mean? What means snow? So, the boy must really symbolize the storage device of the portal, the cold landscape, the way that this thing is released. It has to be in its sub-zero and cold. And remember when we decoded Super Deep, and I told you how in that movie, the cold is what killed the mold? And I told you that they were really telling us the opposite of the truth, that it's the cold that preserves the mold and opens the portal into our bodies. The storage place of the Pokemon sticker. There's the boy there, Snedden. Snedden means snow.
The ice broke. The ice broke. Peter, the other version of him, drowned. Just a few more minutes. I don't want to turn you into a popsicle.
I'll get you one later, Walter.
What is that?
This is a single organism. One with rapidly evolving communication skills, enabling it to form a psychic bond with the boy, a brain cell, and these tendrils, linking them together, essentially dendrites and synapses. I believe that each of these fungal masses is the equivalent to a neuron.
So Bishop figures it out. The mold is the network. You're going to hear him mention communications. And of course, the mold colony being like a brain. Neural networks.
The organism is a vast neural network. Is a vast neural network. Is a vast neural network.
Wait, you're telling me that this whole thing, all of it, is one big giant brain?
What is that?
Well, I thought that since it's a single living entity, that perhaps we should name it for the sake of clarity. Agent Lee, Gus is a growing, evolving mind.
So he names this mold Gus. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little fun today. Why would they name the mold Gus? Let's see how smart you guys are this morning, how sharp you are. Someone's going to get this really fast. Let's let that catch up for a minute. What would be... Now I'll give you some clues. Let's see if you guys can figure this out. I'll give you some clues if no one can figure it out right away. See the first person who gets it. Now, if you have like a PayPal and you figure it, whoever figures it out first, and you have to have a PayPal, I'll send you $10, okay? Hey, Hardy Har Har got it. Wow, good job. Now, let's make sure no one else got it before him, because that happened to me a couple times. And I got in trouble. Someone got mad at me. Like, I got it first. I'm like, okay. So I think Hardy Har Har got it. Wow, you guys are smart. I think Hardy Har Har got it. Okay, so Gus is sugar. Now, okay, why would they name a mold Gus? I'll give you guys a second chance. Now, Hardy Har Har, go ahead and send me an email if you want a $10 PayPal. And if you don't, that's okay too. But why would they name it sugar? This is round 2. Another $10 PayPal. Okay. That's fair, Rebecca. Fungus. Okay. Yeah. I was going for something different, but he sent me an email. I'll send you a PayPal for that. That was a good answer. Why would it be that? Why would it be sugar? Mold feeds on it. Nah, Moss. You got it. Mold feeds on it and thrives. Notice also cancer. So, nah, Moss, send me an email, CaseyBrown1973, and your PayPal, 1973 at gmail.com. And then I'll give you guys. So I got 3 PayPals that are going to go out if you guys want. So, good job, you guys. You guys are very smart subscribers. Now, let's keep going with this. Now, let's go back to the clips here. So, of course, Fungus. That's great. That was great, Rebecca. I wasn't looking for that, but that's good. And then you also have sugar feeding off of, or mold feeding off of sugar, proliferating in those environments. And so if you can reduce your sugar intake, you're going to be a healthier person. But it's very difficult to do because our entire food chain is laden with sugar. Almost everything has sugar. If it didn't grow out of the ground, it's probably got a bunch of sugar in it. And now you know why. Because it's all part of this systematic breakdown and allowing these organisms to go inside of our bodies, which makes us sicker, which enriches the pharmaceutical industrial complex because we're in the doctor trying to figure out what's wrong with us. Let's keep watching here.
Yes. Okay, so the reason that Aaron wasn't affected when we destroyed the fungi in the morgue was
because the colony growing there was unable to connect to the network.
So, if you had any doubts about what they're really talking about here, connecting to the Jive G network, then there he just said it in his own words. Connecting to the network.
And now my contention is that Gus forged a link with Aaron over this shared sense of isolation. And as it grows, it becomes more intelligent, more self-aware.
Self-aware, just like Skynet. So here we have all the descriptors of Jive G. So the mold colony develops this ability to interface with the boy. And this is what they're trying to do with us. This is why warp speed was so important. Because it's a component that will be necessary to bioelectronically interface us with Jive G. And this is why you got this total package with Thump. This is why he pushed Jive G and beyond. This is why he hired the GlaxoSmithKline guy, Soloe, who had a history with bioelectronics and hacking the vagus nerve. This is why it was a complete package, because they're working on something. And this is why Thump announced the Jive G and beyond during the lockdown when we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't protest. We couldn't do anything. And that's when he sprung that on us. So the goal is the hackable human. And whatever this bioweapon that they have will use Jive G to excite the mold inside of our bodies and around our environment, causing it to grow more aggressively in people who have had higher sugar intake, or that their resistance was further weakened if they got a, let's call it a thorn. And they will call it the condition or the syndrome. They'll call it a disease of the immunocompromised is what they'll say. They'll say they don't know why. And this is why this whole AIDS thing is resurfacing. And they're saying that they're going to find a cure for it based on the technology from the stickers. And the only way, as you'll see in this episode, to break the interface is to move towards Christ, the middle, stepping out of the right-left paradigm, just like this boy's going to do. Watch.
Becomes more intelligent, more self-aware,
and ever more conscious of how alone in the world it is.
But before I show you that, remember this? Ezekiel and the hole in the wall, the abominations in the wall. Wow.
How alone in the world it is.
There's more of it back here. A lot more.
There you go. Everything we've been talking about in an episode that came out in 2011, almost mirroring exactly some of the more recent discoveries that we've made across other episodes and other TV shows spanning decades.
I'm ready for another.
Here you have them sharing a milkshake, but here's what's important to note about this. This isn't just a man and a boy sharing a milkshake.
More.
I'm ready for another.
I'm ready for another. That would be the second dose. Straws are like needles. They're hollow inside. They deliver something from one place to another, from the outside into the body. This is all symbolic, you guys. It's all symbolic. They know what they're doing. They know what they're working on. For some reason, they love to brag about it in Hollywood.
Aaron, what's wrong?
Agent Broyles, we've located the injection point. The tech is preparing the toxin.
So there's more clues about injections because they figure out this plan to inject a toxin into the mold. But they also have to give the boy an injection too, because he's linked to the mold. So there you have two doses again.
Astrid, we need to reconfigure the neurostimulator for magnetic resonance, magnetic resonance, magnetic resonance.
So they realize that the boy's connected to the mold and, through the network, right? And so they have to scan the boy's brain to see how they can detach him from the mold colony. So Dr. Bishop asks his assistant to reconfigure this brain scan to read electromagnetic resonance so you can see what's going on in this boy's brain. And the contraption that he puts on the boy's head looks just like a Jive G tower. So in essence, the boy becomes a Jive G tower watch.
We need to chart Aaron's brain activity.
You've done him.
Sorry, son.
I wish we were making all this up, but of course, now if you've been watching this for any amount of time and you're actually listening to what I'm showing you, you will see that I'm not making all this up. This boy's head now looks like a Jive G tower. He becomes the signal that ultimately ends up killing the mold. Watch.
Aaron! He's emotional. Just doesn't have a hold on him.
So here's the boy getting the shot.
Has a hold on it. The emotional center of the brain. Emotion. Yes. Ask him, give me the epinephrine.
Get me the epinephrine. So he first has to dose the boy to stabilize him because he's basically, his body is starting to fail. Because on the other end, the team is injecting the mold with a toxin, and the boy's feeling it. Here you see the guy with the needle. So there's your 2 doses, just like what's happening now.
No!
I know what it is to be lonely. It takes courage to be the one to take someone else's hand, to trust that they won't leave you.
So I did a side by side. I probably could have found some better pictures of a Jive G that looks like what's on his head, but you guys get the drift here.
Aaron, I know how hard it is to make connections. I won't leave you, Aaron.
So Dr. Bishop figures it out. He has to remove all of the fear from the boy's mind. What did Jesus keep telling us over and over and over again in the New Testament? Have no fear. He told us this fact about 15 different times. Don't worry about what you'll eat or drink. That was a statement of not having fear. He told us also that we have the power to tread on serpents. That is a statement of not having fear. He told the disciples not to be afraid many times. They did not get involved in the politics of the day, did they? They did not get involved in the division. Jesus told them the opposite. Love. Love casts out all fear. So, Dr. Bishop basically helps the boy not have fear. And when that happens, it severs the connection between the boy and the mold. Wow. And it's the only way it can happen without the boy and the mole dying together. Now, what would that represent? The wheats and the tares. God said, let them grow up together because you can't separate them now because they're too closely linked together. You can't pull up the tares without affecting the wheat. So you wait till the end, and then that's when the separation happens. And it's the same thing happening in this episode. When you let go of emotion and fear, and you stop going with the tide when it comes to the enemy's plans. You know, I hear people, buying gold and silver. The Bible explicitly says it's the last thing you should be doing because moths and rust destroy it. It's worth nothing. Talks all throughout the Bible about seeking riches, that it will cause your body to be stabbed over with many pains. And it puts you still in the right-left paradigm. It talks about rich men not being able to go to being very difficult for them to go to heaven, passing through the eye of a needle. So,
I'm begging you not to leave me.
Now, this is cringy right here. At the end, because Bishop is seeing these, hallucinations in the black scrying mirror, he begins to lose his mind. So he decides to try a lobotomy on himself. Well, for those of you that have seen lobotomy pictures and how they do it, the procedure looks a lot like a Vidco 19 test swab instruction manual. He opens the book. Here's this red ribbon across it. Another clue. This is the bow mentioned in Revelation 2, the ribbon. And if we compare this image to an actual collection, specimen collection image, you can see that the images are very similar.
It's all right. The area is completely numb. I know exactly what I'm doing.
So she pulls it out of his eye. And of course, I don't even often mention the one-eyed symbolism because it's just so obvious now. But of course, there's the one-eyed symbolism there. So, unbelievable, right? And this was just a simple search going through all the episodes, the synopsis of the episodes anyway, in Wikipedia. I searched the word mold, and lo and behold, there it was. And I was like, I got to decode this. Now, there's another episode that I may be decoding next in which a virus appears. It's called What Lies Below. 2nd season, 12th episode. And there's all this stuff about what seems to be happening right now. So I may decode this one next. But if we don't decode that next, we'll do a Between the Headlines show tomorrow because I've already got lots of headlines pulled up as the controller's plan starts to unravel. There's a new variant on the horizon. That we've got people that have crypto being monitored secretly by the government. It's going off the rails. We got National Guard actually in classrooms now in New Mexico teaching children and doing child care. Now, I don't tell you these things to be afraid, as we talked earlier in the show. I'm telling you these things so you could stay out of the way of these things and not find yourself in the middle of something without warning. Many, many parts of the Bible, God warned people or had his is prophets warn people. In fact, that's the definition of a prophet. Someone who is translating the voice of God and warning people about what's to come. So we're never supposed to stop warning people what's to come. This is why we try to keep our finger on the pulse of the headlines, but we read between the headlines, right? So let's go in here. I believe the entire crypto thing was always meant to monitor people, and they sold it as the opposite, as this secure, system that couldn't be hacked and couldn't be monitored and all these things. And just exactly the opposite has happened. Now, I'm not saying crypto won't go back up Bitcoin won't go back up in value, because it probably will. Basically, what it seems to be happening right now is the policies of the United States is really hurting the value of crypto, because they're now, all of these, what they're called, exchanges are now being required by law to report these transactions to the government, which eliminates the entire reason why most people started using Bitcoin and crypto. It's exactly the opposite of what they stood for. And so now, of course, all that's taxable, and it basically defeats the entire purpose. All right. Okay, let's go into the chat here, see what you guys are up to. No paper trail. Yeah, Bitcoin's pretty much, money laundering. I'm starting to believe that as well. For the rich, though, mostly. All right. Daniel 3 all over again. Bless you too, Skywatcher Dennis. Christian Prepper. Let me zoom this down. I can't read it fast enough. Okay, talk more about the canopic jars and the black goo and all of that. Now, we talked a little bit about this before. In fact, I always kind of talk about it, but for those of you that are new to the channel, I'm just going to do a quick synopsis before we pop off of here about what the black goo is. Now, we all know about the bloodlines, the seed lines, going back to the beginning of the Bible. There will be enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And basically, that was when God laid out the entire history of the Bible, because if you were to look at that statement and that prophecy, it actually did play out. The seed of David and all of his ancestors, going back to Noah and going forward to Christ. And this is why Christ laid out his lineage. Talked about Abraham and David and the exile in Babylon, 14 and 14 and 14 generations. He laid that out because he was demonstrating the seed of the woman, the bloodline. And the serpent came and did bruise the seed of the woman in the heel, didn't he? When the spike and the nail went through the heel of Jesus. But Jesus has already won because he bruised the head of the serpent. And this will be at the end of time. All you have to do is believe. We've already won. You just have to believe in him. Now, where does the black goo come in? Well, the very first time that Egypt is mentioned in the Bible is after Noah and his family got off the ark in the book of Genesis. And there they mention a word, a name, Mizraim. Mizraim means Egypt. It's the first time in the Bible that the word Egypt is translated, and it's translated from the word Mizraim. So Mizraim's bloodline, which is the son of Ham, whose brother was cursed, Canaan. And Canaan then became Cush, became Nimrod, who defied God as well. Well, there was something going on with the Hamite bloodline. Not good actors. They caused all the trouble in history. They became the seed of the serpent. And from Ham's bloodline were spawned giants after the flood. Giants after the flood. Anyone can go right now, open your Bible after they got off the ark, and you will read dozens of stories about giants. Where did they come from? Before the flood, God said in those days there would be giants in those days and after. So after the flood. So Mizraim became the first pharaoh. Now, I don't know that for sure, but it's the first time it's mentioned in the Bible. And imagine the water world all the waters had receded. So there wasn't much left. So obviously Egypt existed after the flood. So that must have been Mizraim. Now, there are some scholars that believe Mizraim was actually the first pharaoh. They actually can look at that, and the names are actually similar as well. The first dynasty. So, these pharaohs were giants. They were depicted as giants in almost all the hieroglyphs. 3 and 4 times the size of their slaves in the hieroglyphs. Now, some people say, oh, that's just how they did art to demonstrate and illustrate their superiority over the slaves and their peoples. But I believe it was literal interpretation. They were giants. We know there were giants because the Bible tells us there were after the flood. So none of this is a stretch. So then what happened is these bloodlines had technology that they learned from the fallen angels of how to try to preserve life. How do they do it? Well, history tells us that these pharaohs preserved their internal organs into canopic jars, which would then reduced down when they opened these jars in modern times. These internal organs were still there. They had been reduced down to a black goo. Now, what the heck is that about? Well, the black goo is the ancient pharaonic DNA, the ancient Nephilim DNA. And we know what they can do with DNA. We know that they can reanimate creatures. We know that that ancient blood probably has some metallic properties to it, because their blood is copper-based. Are you starting to see the whole picture now? The blue bloods, hemocyanin, copper-based blood, the metal already mixed in with the clay, which would create some pretty interesting properties, wouldn't it, if you had metal blood? Now, we have iron-based blood. So you have to ask yourself, what is that all about? Well, Anubis was the ancient pharaonic god that was responsible for the afterworld. He was the one who instructed them to store their DNA in these canopic jars. Why would he do that? To preserve them into the afterworld, which is now. Now they're waking up. These days will be just like the days of Noah, with giants running around, hybrids. So now you're starting to see the whole picture here. So what are they going to do with this black goo? What are they going to do with this DNA? Well, they're experimenting with it. Now, there are rumors, and I don't know this to be true, and I'll tell you when I don't know things to be true. And of course, all this is conjecture. I don't know any of this, but I'm a researcher like you guys. So we're trying to figure everything out. But there are stories and rumors that when they found these canopic jars full of this black goo, the basically decomposed internal organs, that it had bizarre properties to it, that it actually could crawl across surfaces. It was alive, just like in the Spider-Man movies. And so that's what this is all about. Okay. That's what the black goo is. So that was a great question. Whoever asked that question. Because it's good to review this stuff. And every day we're learning more about what this is about. Now you know why you need the blood of Jesus, which counters the black blood of the Nephilim. You see how all this works? There's a reason why there was such heavy emphasis on the blood of Jesus. It's because this is all sorcery. The life is in the blood. So it's front and center. It's the most important thing on the spiritual level. The blood was able to actually cry out from the ground after Abel was slaughtered. It reached to heaven. How did it do that? Because there's life in it. In Jesus' lifeblood, symbolically, when you give yourself to him, that blood protects you. It literally does. From the dark blood, from the blue blood. It protects you. But you have to believe. And supernaturally, it allows you to be protected. It allows you to be grafted into everlasting life, past this life. But if you don't believe in him, you then become a victim of the devil and whatever vices and weapons and anything that he wants to employ against you. And this is why this whole Pokemon sticker was so important, because it represented your faith. Was your faith in the red blood of Jesus on the post and lentils, the Passover, or was it on the blue bloods? So, do you guys have any other questions today? Now, I just explained that from memory, but I might have left out some very important pieces of some of our research. And so here's one more aspect to it. Now you know why the enemy is always trying to derail this whole sacrifice thing. How does he do it? By hyperbolizing the act in a dark way to try to taint something that was so very special and so dear to God's heart, which is his son's blood. And so what does the enemy does? He does his own sacrifices. And he tries to say, see, isn't that disgusting? Look, if I do it, that's only because God did it first. This is what the enemy does. He turns everything dark and tries to taint everything. Don't fall into that trap. Don't think just because Jesus died and God sent his son and he spilled his blood, that is a gross thing. It's not. The enemy will try to make it sound like that. This is why they do what they do. This is why Machine Gun Kelly and what's her name were drinking each other's blood. It's to make us look crazy. That's why they do it. Because the minute someone says to them, wow, you just drank her blood, that's disgusting. They say, well, Jesus said, this is your body, this is my body, this is my blood. They did the same thing. It's all mockery. Exactly. Ain't buying it. It's all mockery. Now, of course, Jesus didn't tell us to actually drink his blood. It was symbolic. What he meant was taking us in. Taking him in to us. Filling you with the Holy Spirit. That's what it was symbolic of. But, I see it clear as day now, what the enemy is trying to do. I see it as clear as day. There are lots of people running around just trying to mock him. All right. Do a show on the tech artist. Oh, it went by too fast. Okay. All right, you guys. Long show today. I'm going to let you go now. I love each and every one of you. And we'll be back on here tomorrow with probably headlines. And then I'll get into this other Fringe episode. What Lies Below. Might do that one on Friday. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your day.